In this video I will show you that the 488 loses on average $18,000 per year, where the prices will be heading and why there are actually two 488 markets. What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. So according to many fortunate people who have driven a 488, it is less desirable than a 458. And this of course raises a few interesting questions like whether or not this difference in desirability is reflected in the values, and is the 488 doomed to depreciate a lot? Those are of course very interesting questions to answer, and many of you did then also request an analysis for the 488 market. And among those were the Quarantine Chef and Ali. Now if you also want to request an analysis, simply comment the name of the car for which you would like to see an analysis down below in the comment section. Once enough people request a certain car, I will make a video about it. Now then, let's start with the 488 market, and as always we are going to take a few steps. First, we will look at the full mid-engine Ferrari depreciation curve and see how the 488 prices relate to the ones of the 360, 430 and 458. In the second step we will zoom in then to the 458 market and see what it is all about. After that, we will have a look then to the depreciation numbers such as the depreciation per year and the depreciation per 1000 miles driven. In step number 4 we will use those values then to say something about the forecasted values, and in step number 5 I will show you how all of this relates to the other cars which I've analyzed on this channel. Now let's get analyzing with step number 1. The full mid-engine Ferrari market is now appearing in the graph over here, and you can see that we have the model year on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. Each car is represented by a bubble, and the lines going through the graph show the depreciation curves. And you can see that almost all generations are included. In blue we have the 360, in orange we have the 430, in green the 458 and in red the 488. Prices are by the way all in US dollars because this is based on the US market. Now if we look to the full curve, then we can see that this is relatively flat. And this is of course an interesting observation. For many car markets you namely see a large drop in the first 3 to 4 years, after which the market starts to bottom. We can of course also see a drop here, but the depreciation is much more consistent throughout a car's lifetime. Note by the way that the F8 Tributo is not included over here. Including this car would of course increase the slope of the curve slightly in the beginning. Now if we shift our focus then to the 488, then we can see that the older models are actually priced in line with the 458s. Now I already touched upon this in the beginning of the video, but I didn't expect the difference to be this small. A 458 from model year 2015 will set you back $220,000, while this is $223,000 for a 488 from model year 2016. And what makes this even more crazy is that a 488 at that price point tends to have a mileage of 13,000 miles, while a 488 will have one around 5,000 miles. So in essence you pay the same for an older car with more mileage. And to me, this is a strong indication that the market indeed sees that the 458 is something special and the last of its kind. Normally, you would namely see small market breaks between two generations of the same car model, but that's definitely not the case over here. And we will figure out later in this video what this means for the future 488 values. If you by the way want to know more about the 360, 430 or 458, then I recommend that you check out my full analysis for those cars. The links to those videos will be appearing right over here, and I will also make sure to put them down below in the description of the video. Now then, let's zoom in even further to the 488 market, but before we do so, please support the channel by smashing that like button. The 488 market is appearing now right over here, and you can see that we have still the model year on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. Everything in the graph works the same as the one you saw previously, but now we only have the 488 included. Let's run through some market statistics. There are 218 cars for sale, and these exclude all the special versions. You won't find any 70th anniversary editions, Force of Nature cars or pistas in here. What you will find in here though are many red cars. 38% of the cars is namely red. And there's by the way not really a price difference between a red car and let's say a black one. Now speaking about those prices, most of the 488s are priced around $267,000, and for that price you get a car with 3,000 miles. We can see though that prices vary a lot. The higher mileage cars start at around $180,000, while the low mileage cars are priced as high as $360,000. Now if we looked into the depreciation line, then we can see that it is still more or less a straight line. And this line shows that On average, you lose $18.4 thousand per year on a 488, and this equals around 6% per year. That number though doesn't tell the full story. You can namely see that there are large gaps in the market for model year 2017, 18 and 19. And that means that there appears to be a category of cars which is priced lower and one which is priced higher. And what you're looking at here is the difference between the Coupes and the Spiders. So let's split the market. You can see that we have now the Spiders in blue, the Coupes in orange, and that the market already makes a lot more sense. For any given model year, the Spiders are namely $45,000 more expensive than a Coupe. And the big reason for this is that the MSRP for a Spider was $28,000 higher than the one for a Coupe. The interesting part here is of course the difference in prices now, $45,000 versus then $28,000. And since the Spiders and the Coupes have the same mileage, there can only be two explanations. First, it can be that the Spiders were simply spec'd a lot higher. This would namely mean that the average price gap between the Spider and the Coupe was a lot more than $28,000. Second, and this is the more likely explanation I think, the Spiders depreciated less than the Coupes. And that in turn could mean that the Spiders are more desirable than the Coupes, and that can of course be the case. Now if we look then at those depreciation numbers, then it indeed seems to be the case that the Spider is more desirable than the Coupe. The Spider namely loses on average $13.9 thousand per year, while this is $17.3 thousand for the Coupe. We can see though that the Coupe market is forming a slight bottom, something which we can't really see yet in the Spider market. Now, so far we have looked at the depreciation per year, but there is of course also something as the depreciation per 1,000 miles driven. The mileage is then also the second most important factor for the price of a car. Now for the newer cars, like the 488, Spec of course also plays a key role in the pricing. The data quality for the Spec is however very poor. In many cases it's simply missing and there's absolutely no consistency. So unfortunately we can't take that into account here. So let's have a look to the depreciation per 1,000 miles with this graph over here. And after that we will use the values from this graph in combination with the ones from the depreciation per year to say something about the future values. And this graph in essence works the same as all of the ones which you saw before. It's just that instead of model year, we have now the mileage on the horizontal axis. And because we saw that there is an important difference in price between the Spider and the Coupe, I also included the split here. We have the Spider in blue and the Coupe in orange. If we look then first just to the mileages, then we can see that quite many cars are garage queens and have only somewhere around 500 miles on the clock. We can also see that there are only a few examples of cars which have more than 10,000 miles. If we look then to the depreciation curves, then we can see that the Coupe loses slightly less than the Spider. The Coupe loses on average $3.3 thousand per 1,000 miles and the Spider $4.3 thousand. And also here, please keep in mind that these rates reflect the averages. If you look for example to the Coupe, then you can see that there's a huge price drop once you cross the 1,000 miles. After that, the price sensitivity to mileage decreases. So then, what does this mean for the forecasted values? After all, that's probably what you're interested in. Well, if you want to know the forecasted values for a car from model year 2017, 18 or 19, you can just follow the depreciation line. Depending on the mileage which are added to the car will lose less or more than forecasted. But what about the cars from model year 2016? For those, we don't have the depreciation curve yet. We can however forecast the prices based on the current depreciation per year and the depreciation per 1,000 miles, and that's then also what I did with the forecasting model. So let's have a look to the results. You are now looking at the same graph as in the beginning of the video, where we have the 360, the 430, the 458 and the 488. You can see though that I included the forecasted prices for the 2016 488s in purple. Also, you can see that there are quite many forecasted points. And that is because each point represents a car with a different mileage. And it is of course so that the ones with the highest mileage are priced the lowest and the ones with the lowest mileage are priced the highest. But let's zoom a bit in to see what's going on. We can see that the forecasted prices start at $182,000 and that this forecast is for a car with 16,000 miles. Forecasted prices go then up to $235,000 and this is for a car with 800 miles. And I didn't plan this, but it's quite striking to see that the forecasted prices match exactly with the current prices of the 458. But because we're looking at the forecasted prices, that only goes if the 458 prices won't change. And I probably don't need to mention this, but I will say it anyway. Keep in mind that these are forecasted prices and that forecasts carry uncertainty in them. There is therefore a risk that the forecast does not materialize. So then, you're fully updated on all of the statistics for the 488 market. And that means that it's time to move on to the last step, step number 5, which is the Depreciation Leaderboard. With this leaderboard we can namely see if the 488 rates are actually high or low, as it allows us to compare the rates to other cars. The leaderboard is appearing now on your screen, and you can see that we have the different cars on the horizontal axis and that we have the relative average depreciation on the vertical axis. If we search then for the 488, then we can see that it ranks somewhere in the middle with a rate of 6.4%. And this is not bad if you compare it, for example, to a GT3, GT3 RS, AMG GTR or 720S. In fact, it's only the GT3 RS which scores better, but there's not much in it. What is also interesting to see is that the relative rate is almost the same as the one for the 430, but higher than a 458 and 360. So again, this confirms that 458s are highly desirable cars. I, by the way, have separate depreciation analysis for each of the cars which you saw listed on the horizontal axis. So if you want to know more about them, you can browse through my channel and watch the in-depth analysis. And with that being said, let's wrap up the video and conclude. In general, the mid-engine Ferraris depreciate at a very predictable rate. There are no large price drops visible, and as the car ages, the absolute rate of course decreases. The 488 sits however in a difficult spot. The depreciation rates are not bad at all, especially when you compare it to the competitors. Now when you compare it to a 458 though, then it might turn out that that is actually its biggest competitor. The prices of the old 488s namely came down to the 458 level, and this is highly unusual. It will then also be very interesting to follow both markets and to see if 488 prices will actually dive under 458 prices. The risk is there, but time will tell. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed it, please remember to support the channel by smashing that like button. Also, make sure to comment down below a car for which you would like to see an analysis, and to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, a huge thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new analysis.